text arrived on a Tuesday morning while I was reviewing quarterly reports in my corner office, 43 floors above downtown Seattle. My phone buzzed against the glass desk, and I glanced at it without thinking, the way you do when you expect nothing important. It was from my mother. No greeting, no warmth, just a photograph of an invitation spread across her kitchen counter. Pale pink cardstock, delicate gold lettering, the kind of stationery that costs more than most people spend on groceries. My sister Vanessa's baby shower. The date was circled in red marker. Below the photo, my mother had written that the shower would be intimate, just close family and Vanessa's friends. She wrote that she hoped I would understand that Vanessa needed this day to be stress-free. I stared at those words until the screen dimmed. Stress-free. That was the word they always used when they met without me. I scrolled down, looking for more context, some explanation that might soften the blow. Instead, I found a second photo. The guest list. Handwritten in my mother's careful cursive. Names I recognized, aunts, cousins, Vanessa's college roommates. And there, near the bottom, my own name with a single line drawn through it in black ink. Not erased. Not forgotten. Deliberately crossed out. If you're listening to this right now, I want you to pause for just a moment. Think about where you are. Maybe you are commuting, the world sliding past your window. Maybe you are folding laundry or washing dishes while this plays in the background. Maybe you are lying awake at 3 a.m, searching for a story that makes you feel less alone in whatever you are carrying. I was sitting in a leather chair that cost more than my first car, looking at proof that my family had voted me off the island. Again, tell me in the comments what you are doing while you listen. It helps me feel less alone when I imagine you there. My name is Elise Chen. I was 36 years old that morning, and I had spent the last decade building something from nothing. A financial technology company called Meridian Analytics that I had started in my apartment with 3 credit cards and a desperate belief that I could make something better than what existed. 2 years earlier, I had sold it for $340 million. Nobody in my family knew. As far as they were concerned, I was still the difficult daughter who worked too much and asked too many questions. That was how they preferred it. To understand why that crossed-out name hit so hard, I need to take you back to the beginning. Not to that Tuesday morning, but to the years that carved me into the person sitting in that office. I grew up in a split-level house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. My parents were comfortable, not wealthy, but comfortable enough that we never worried about groceries or heat. My father sold insurance. My mother taught 3rd grade until she retired. On paper, we looked like the kind of family you would see in a catalog. 2 parents, 2 daughters, a golden retriever named Murphy. But inside that house, the math never quite worked out the way it looked. Vanessa was born 3 years after me, and from the moment she arrived, something shifted in the family gravity. She was easier, they said. More pleasant. Less intense. She smiled when you wanted her to smile and cried only when it was appropriate. I was the other kind of child. The one who asked why rules existed before following them. The one who corrected teachers when they got facts wrong. The one who needed to understand things before accepting them. My parents called it difficult. Teachers called it disruptive. The other kids just called me weird. By high school, the roles were locked in place. Vanessa was the golden daughter, effortlessly charming, coasting through classes with grades just good enough to avoid concern. I was the problem child, even when my problems were straight A's. As an early acceptance to college. Even success felt like a failure when it came from me. The money started disappearing when I was 17. My grandfather on my mother's side, a man named Harold Park, had been setting aside savings for both his granddaughters since we were born. He told me about it once during a summer visit, his voice proud and a little shy. He said he had been putting away $50 a month for each of us since the day we were born. By the time we turned 18, he said there would be enough for a real start. Not college money, but seed money. The kind of cushion that let you take a risk or survive a setback. I did the math in my head while he talked. 17 years at $50 a month. Over $10,000 waiting for me. The number felt impossible, like finding a secret room in a house you thought you knew. When I turned 18 and asked my parents about the fund, my father's face did something complicated. He told me that Grandpa's memory was not what it used to be. He said there had never been any significant fund. He said, maybe Grandpa had meant to save, but never quite managed it. I believed him. What choice did I have? I was 18 and desperate to start my life. I took out student loans and worked 3 jobs through college. I ate ramen for dinner and sold plasma for grocery money. I told myself that struggling built character, that I was stronger for having nothing handed to me. It was not until years later that I learned the truth. The years between college and success were a blur of exhaustion and determination. I graduated with a degree in computer science and a minor in finance, neither of which my parents understood or appreciated. While Vanessa married a real estate agent and moved into a house our parents helped fund, I bounced between startups and side projects, always chasing something I could not quite name. Meridian Analytics started in 2016, born from frustration with existing financial modeling tools. I built the first prototype myself, teaching myself new programming languages from YouTube tutorials at 2 in the morning. The early years were brutal. I maxed out credit cards, I slept on a futon in my office, I went months without seeing anyone who was not a coworker or a potential investor. My family watched from a distance, occasionally asking when I was going to get a real job or settle down like my sister. Every Thanksgiving, my mother would mention that Vanessa and Derek were thinking about buying a vacation property. Every Christmas, my father would ask if I was still doing that computer thing. I stopped going home for holidays around year 3. It was easier to claim work emergencies than to sit at a table where my existence felt like an inconvenience. The sale happened quietly. A larger company made an offer I could not refuse. The lawyers handled everything. The money arrived in my account like a dream I had forgotten I was having. $340 million, minus taxes and fees, still left me with more money than my parents would earn in 100 lifetimes. I told no one in my family, partly because they had never asked about my work in any meaningful way. Partly because I knew exactly what would happen if they found out. So I kept living simply. Same apartment. Same car. Same careful distance from people who had never made space for me. Then my mother sent that photograph, and something inside me cracked wide open. I did not cry when I saw my name crossed out. That was not the kind of pain that came with tears. It was older than that, deeper. The kind that had calcified into something hard and permanent years ago. Instead, I did what I always did when my family disappointed me. I called Grandpa. He answered on the 4th ring, his voice creaky but warm. He asked if everything was okay, and I could hear the worry underneath the words. I almost never called during work hours. I told him I was fine. I asked what he was doing. He said he was watching a cooking show and trying to figure out how to make something called tonkatsu. He had seen it on a travel program about Japan and thought it looked interesting. Then he laughed and said he would probably burn the house down if he tried. Something shifted in my chest. Grandpa Harold was 81 years old, living alone in the same small house in Salem where he had lived since my grandmother died 15 years earlier. He moved slowly now, using a cane when his hip acted up, but his mind was still sharp. Sharper than my parents gave him credit for. I asked him if he had heard about Vanessa's baby shower. There was a pause on the line. Then he said yes. He had heard. He said my mother had called to let him know it was happening, but that he should not worry about attending. She said the drive would be too much for him. She said they would send pictures. Send pictures of his great-grandchild's celebration. Like he was a distant relative, instead of a man who had spent his whole life loving this family. I asked him if they had sent him an invitation. Another pause, longer this time. Then he admitted quietly that they had not. He tried to sound like it was fine, like he understood, like he was not hurt. But I could hear it in his voice, the same weight I carried, the same quiet exclusion dressed up as consideration. I made a decision in that moment. It crystallized so quickly and completely that it felt less like choosing and more like remembering something I had always known. I told Grandpa to keep his calendar open for the weekend of the baby shower. I told him I would call him back with details. He asked what I was planning. I said I was planning to take him somewhere he had always wanted to go. The next few days were a flurry of planning. I booked 2 first-class tickets to Tokyo, departing the morning of Vanessa's baby shower. I reserved a suite at a hotel in Shinjuku with views of the city skyline and staff who specialized in accessibility accommodations. I researched restaurants, temples, gardens, everything Grandpa had ever mentioned wanting to see. He had talked about Japan for as long as I could remember. When I was small, he would show me pictures from a National Geographic magazine and tell me about the food, the culture, the cherry blossoms that looked like pink clouds. He had never gone. There was never enough money, never enough time, never the right circumstances. After Grandma died, he stopped talking about travel altogether, like the dream had been buried with her. I was going to give him that dream. Not because of spite, not to punish anyone, but because he deserved it. Because someone in this family should know what it felt like to be chosen. The morning of our departure, I drove to Salem to pick him up. His house looked smaller than I remembered, the garden overgrown, the paint peeling in places. He was waiting on the porch with a small suitcase, wearing his best jacket and a look of bewildered excitement. He asked again where we were going. I told him we were going to Japan. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes going bright and wet. Then he laughed, a sound caught between disbelief and joy, and said he had always wanted to see Tokyo. I helped him into the car, loaded his suitcase, and pulled out of the driveway. As we turned onto the main road, he reached over and squeezed my hand. He said he did not know what he had done to deserve this. I told him he had been the only person in my family who ever made me feel like I belonged. That was more than enough. The flight was 14 hours of wonder. Grandpa had never flown first class. He touched everything like it might disappear, the seat that reclined into a bed, the menu printed on heavy paper, the hot towels and champagne. The flight attendant brought him warm nuts, and he looked at me like I had given him a kingdom. Somewhere over the Pacific, after they dimmed the cabin lights, and most passengers settled into sleep, Grandpa turned to me with a different expression. Serious. Careful. He said there was something he needed to tell me. Something he should have told me a long time ago. I waited, watching the darkness outside the window. He said he knew about the money. The savings he had set aside for me. He said he had given it to my parents when I turned 18, trusting them to pass it along. He said it was not until years later that he realized I had never received it. My throat tightened. I asked how much it was. He said $12,400. He said he had kept records. He said he had asked my parents about it once, years ago, and my mother had told him I had used it for college expenses. He had believed her because he wanted to believe her. Then he said something that made my vision blur. He said he had found out later that they had given the money to Vanessa. For her wedding, for the down payment on her house, for things she needed, they said, because she was building a life, and I was just chasing some computer dream. I sat very still, processing numbers that suddenly meant something different. Not just money, but proof. Proof that the favoritism I had felt my whole life was not paranoia. Proof that my parents had literally taken what was meant for me and given it to my sister. Grandpa's hand found mine again. He apologized, his voice breaking. He said he should have checked sooner. He said he should have given the money to me directly. He said he had failed me. I told him he had not failed anyone. I told him the people who failed were the ones who lied and stole and called it family. I told him none of this was his fault. We sat in silence for a while, 30,000 feet above the ocean, 2 people carrying decades of hurt between them. Then I told him something I had never told anyone in my family. I told him about the sale, about the $340 million, about the life I had built while they were not watching. His eyes went wide. He asked me to repeat the number. I did. For a long moment he just stared at me. Then he started to laugh, a deep, genuine laugh that made other passengers turn their heads. He laughed until tears streamed down his face. He said he always knew I would do something extraordinary. He said he had told my grandmother that, back before she died, that I had something special in me that nobody else could see. I felt something loosen in my chest that had been tight for years. He asked me why I had never told anyone. Why I had kept this secret even from him. I tried to explain. I said that money changed how people looked at you. I said that the moment my family found out, I would become valuable to them in a way I had never been before. Not because of who I was, but because of what I had. I said I wanted to know for certain who loved me for me. The silence had been a kind of test, and they had all failed it. He nodded slowly, like he understood completely. He said that was the thing about wealth. It did not change who you were. It revealed who everyone else was. We talked for hours after that, long past when the cabin lights dimmed and other passengers fell asleep. He told me stories about Grandma that I had never heard, how they had met at a dance in 1962, how she had made him promise to take her to Japan someday, how they had put off the trip year after year until suddenly the years were gone. He said he had kept that promise in his heart, even after she died. He said maybe in some way, this trip was for her too. I held his hand and told him we would make sure it was everything she would have wanted. Tokyo was everything Grandpa had dreamed and more. We spent the first day slowly, letting his body adjust to the time change. The hotel suite had 2 bedrooms and a living area with floor-to-ceiling windows. He stood at the glass for 20 minutes, just watching the city move below. The neon signs flashing, the trains gliding silently on elevated tracks, the organized chaos of millions of people living their lives. He said it looked like the future. He said his wife would have loved this view. The hotel staff had prepared everything perfectly. Grab rails in the bathroom, a wheelchair available for longer excursions. Staff who spoke English and checked on us without being intrusive. Every detail I had requested was in place, and Grandpa kept commenting on how they treated him like a person, not a problem. Over the following days, we saw the Sensoji Temple in Asakusa, with its massive red lantern and incense smoke curling through the air. The temple was crowded with tourists and pilgrims, but somehow it still felt sacred. Grandpa stood in front of the main hall and closed his eyes, breathing in the incense. He said he could feel something peaceful there, something old and true. We bought fortunes from the temple dispensers. His said good luck would come after patience. Mine said the obstacle is the path. We laughed about how appropriate they were. We ate sushi at a tiny restaurant where the chef prepared each piece in front of us, Grandpa's eyes wide with wonder at flavors he had only imagined. The fish was so fresh it seemed to melt. The rice was warm and perfectly seasoned. Each piece arrived like a small gift, and the chef watched our reactions with quiet pride. Grandpa asked question after question. What kind of fish was this? How did they prepare the rice? What was the name of that pink one? The chef, who spoke limited English, answered as best he could, and the other patrons at the counter helped translate. By the end of the meal, Grandpa had made friends with everyone in the restaurant. That was the thing about him. He had never lost the ability to connect with people. Unlike my parents who treated strangers as inconveniences, Grandpa treated everyone like they might be interesting. Because to him, they were. We walked through the gardens of the Imperial Palace, the gravel crunching under our feet, while koi fish circled in ancient ponds. The paths were smooth enough for his wheelchair on the days when walking was too much. He insisted on walking short distances himself, using his cane, wanting to feel the earth under his feet. He said the gardens reminded him of a painting he had seen once, a long time ago, in a museum with Grandma. He said he had told her then that someday they would see the real thing. He said it only took 60 years, but here they were. At every stop, Grandpa would pause and say something like, he could not believe this was real. He would touch a temple gate, or a cherry tree, or a piece of perfectly arranged food, and shake his head slowly, like he was memorizing everything. I took photographs constantly. Not for social media, but for him. So he could look back later and remember every detail, so he would have proof that this had really happened, that someone had thought he was worth this. One afternoon, we visited the Edo Tokyo Museum, a massive building filled with exhibits about the city's history. Grandpa was fascinated by the old photographs, the reconstruction of historical streets, the stories of ordinary people who had lived through extraordinary times. He spent an hour in front of one exhibit about post-war reconstruction, reading every placard, asking me to translate things his eyes could not quite make out. He said the resilience of the people amazed him. He said it reminded him of his own parents, who had survived the depression, who had built lives from nothing. He said that was what real strength looked like. Not money or power, but the ability to keep going when everything fell apart. I thought about my own struggles. The years of building Meridian, the nights when I thought I would fail, the moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. I had survived because something in me refused to stop. Maybe that was the inheritance he had given me. Not money, but stubbornness. One evening, we found the tonkatsu restaurant he had seen on that cooking show. It was a small place, 6 seats at a counter, run by a man who had been frying cutlets for 40 years. The walls were covered with photographs and handwritten notes from customers. The smell of hot oil and fresh breadcrumbs filled the tiny space. Grandpa ordered the same dish he had tried to make at home, and when it arrived, golden and perfect, he took one bite and closed his eyes. He said it was the best thing he had ever eaten in his life. The chef smiled at that, understanding the compliment even without translation. I watched him savor each piece. This man who had spent 81 years on Earth and was finally tasting something he had dreamed about for decades, and I felt something like peace settle over me. After dinner, we walked slowly through the streets of the neighborhood. The evening was cool and clear. Lanterns glowed outside izakayas and small shops. Salarymen in suits hurried past us toward train stations. The city pulsed with a rhythm that felt both foreign and familiar. Grandpa stopped in front of a small shop selling handmade goods. In the window there was a ceramic sake set, delicate and beautiful, painted with cherry blossoms. He stared at it for a long moment. He said Grandma would have loved it. He said she collected beautiful things, small treasures that made her happy. He said after she died, he could not bear to look at her collection for years. I asked if he wanted to buy it. He shook his head. He said he was done collecting things. At his age, what mattered was collecting moments. This trip, this meal, this walk through a city he had dreamed about. Those were the treasures now. I bought the sake set anyway, when he was not looking. I planned to give it to him later when we were home, as a reminder of this night. On the third night, while Grandpa was resting in his room after a long day at the Meiji Shrine, I sat on the balcony and looked at my phone. I had been ignoring it since we arrived. Dozens of notifications stacked on the screen, texts and calls from numbers I recognized. The Meiji Shrine had been one of the highlights so far. The massive torii gates, towering over forested paths. The peaceful inner gardens where people wrote wishes on wooden tablets and hung them for the gods to read. Grandpa had written a wish himself, his hand trembling slightly as he held the brush. He would not tell me what he wrote. He said some things were private between a man and his maker. I respected that. But I noticed he seemed lighter afterward, like he had set something down that he had been carrying for a long time. Now, alone on the balcony with Tokyo glittering below, I finally faced what I had been avoiding. I opened the family group chat first. The messages were a chaotic scroll of updates about the baby shower, which had apparently happened 2 days earlier. Photos of pink decorations and wrapped gifts. Pictures of Vanessa opening presents while my mother beamed beside her. Comments from cousins and aunts about how beautiful everything was. No one had mentioned my absence. No one had asked where I was. Not a single message in the entire thread wondered why Elise was not there or hoped she was okay. I had been erased so completely that even my absence was unremarkable. The sting of that realization was duller than I expected. Maybe because I had finally stopped hoping they would change. Maybe because I was sitting on a balcony in Tokyo with a man who had always loved me, and that felt more real than anything in that chat. Then I saw that my cousin Melissa had posted something in the extended family Facebook group. I clicked through and found a photo that made my breath catch. It was me and Grandpa. We were standing in front of the Sensoji temple, both of us smiling, the massive red lantern towering behind us. I had asked a tourist to take it earlier that day, wanting to capture the moment. Melissa must have seen it on my social media and shared it. The comments underneath had exploded. Relatives asking where we were. My aunt demanding to know why Grandpa was in Japan. My mother, her comment in all capitals, asking what was going on and why no one had told her about this. I scrolled lower. Someone had mentioned the baby shower. Someone else had connected the dots. The thread had devolved into accusations and confusion. A cousin I barely knew had written that it seemed weird that Elise and Grandpa were in Japan during Vanessa's shower. Another had replied that maybe they had planned it that way. A third suggested I was trying to upstage my sister. The theories multiplied, each one more creative than the last. None of them came close to the truth. Then a new message arrived in the family group chat. My mother, typing directly. She said I needed to explain myself immediately. She said I had no right to take Grandpa anywhere without telling the family. She said I was being selfish and dramatic as usual. She said I needed to call her right now. The phrases were so familiar they felt like a script she had been reading for my whole life. Selfish, dramatic, difficult. The words she used to dismiss anything I did that did not fit her narrative. I set the phone down and looked at the Tokyo skyline. The city glittered like a circuit board, millions of lights winking in the darkness. Somewhere down there, people were living their lives, falling in love, eating dinner, working late, completely unaware of the small drama unfolding on my screen. For the first time in my life, I did not feel the urge to explain myself. I did not feel the need to smooth things over or apologize for existing. I just felt tired of pretending their version of reality was the only one that mattered. I picked up the phone and typed 3 words into the group chat. Greetings from Tokyo. Then I attached the photo of me and Grandpa at the temple. The chat exploded. Messages appearing so fast, I could barely read them. Questions, accusations, demands for explanation. My mother's name appearing over and over, her fury visible even in text. I watched the chaos unfold with a strange sense of detachment, like I was watching a storm from behind thick glass. It could rage all it wanted. I was safe here, in this moment, in this city, with the one person who had never made me feel like I needed to apologize for existing. The video call request came less than an hour later. Not from one person, but from the family group, a conference call with my parents, Vanessa, and her husband Derek, all trying to connect at once. I declined the first 3 attempts. Then I walked to Grandpa's room and knocked softly. He was awake, reading a travel guide about Kyoto. I told him the family had seen our photos. I told him they were calling. I asked if he wanted to be part of whatever came next. He closed the book slowly and looked at me with steady eyes. He said he had spent too many years being quiet when he should have spoken. He said he wanted to see their faces when the truth came out. I helped him into the living area of the suite and positioned him in a chair where the camera could see him clearly. The Tokyo skyline glowed behind us like a stage backdrop. Then I accepted the call. Their faces appeared in a grid on my screen. My mother looked furious, her mouth already open to speak. My father sat beside her, his expression the careful blankness he wore when he wanted to avoid conflict. Vanessa was in a different location, her own living room, her pregnant belly visible beneath a soft sweater. Derek hovered behind her, arms crossed. My mother started immediately. She demanded to know what I thought I was doing. She said Grandpa was too old to travel. She said I had manipulated him. She said I was punishing the family because I was not invited to one baby shower. I let her finish. I had learned years ago that interrupting only gave her ammunition. When she finally paused for breath, I spoke calmly. I said Grandpa was a grown man capable of making his own decisions. I said he had wanted to see Japan his whole life, and no one else had ever offered to take him. I said I was not punishing anyone. I was simply choosing to spend my time with someone who had always chosen me. Vanessa jumped in then. Her voice had that wounded quality she used when she wanted sympathy. She said I was being dramatic. She said the baby shower was just a small thing. She said I should not make everything about me. I looked at her face on the screen, my younger sister, the one who had always been given what I had to fight for. Then I said I wanted to talk about something else. I said I wanted to talk about Grandpa's savings accounts. The reaction was immediate. My mother's face went pale. My father's careful blankness cracked into something like fear. Even Vanessa looked uncertain, her eyes flicking to our parents. I said I knew about the money. The $12,400 that Grandpa had saved for me since I was born. The money that was supposed to be my seed fund. My start. My cushion. I said I knew it had been given to Vanessa instead, for her wedding, for her house, for her life. My mother started to interrupt, to explain, to redirect. I held up my hand. I was not finished. Then I turned the camera slightly, so Grandpa was more visible. I asked him to tell them what he had told me on the plane. He spoke slowly, his voice heavy with the weight of what he was about to say. He told them he had kept records. He told them he had trusted them to do the right thing. He told them he had spent years believing their lies about how the money was used. Then he said the words that made my mother flinch. He said he was ashamed of them. He said he had raised them better than this. He said stealing from your own family was something he never thought he would see from his own children. The video call went silent. Vanessa started crying. She said she did not know. She said no one told her where the money came from. She said she would pay it back. My father tried to speak. Something about misunderstandings and family sticking together. I cut him off. I said I did not need their money anymore. I said I had built my own life without their help, without their approval, without their acknowledgement. I told them about Meridian Analytics. I told them about the sale. I told them the number. The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the traffic sounds of Tokyo through the windows. My mother's mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Vanessa looked like she might faint. Her hand went to her belly, protective, as if she could shield her unborn child from the revelation unfolding on the screen. Derek, who had been hovering in the background, suddenly moved closer to the camera. His expression had changed, calculating now, interested in a way it had never been before. I could see him doing the math, reassessing everything he thought he knew about me, about his wife's family, about which sister was actually the successful one. My father recovered first. His voice came out strained, almost plaintive. He asked why I had never told them. He asked if I had been keeping this secret deliberately. He asked if I was punishing them. I told them I had not mentioned the money because I knew exactly how they would react. I said I was not interested in suddenly becoming valuable to people who had spent my whole life treating me like a burden. I said their behavior toward me had never changed when they thought I was struggling. So I wanted to see if it would change when they thought I was the same difficult daughter they had always known. It had not changed. The baby shower had proven that. My name crossed off the list had proven that. Grandpa, excluded from his own great-grandchild's celebration, had proven that. Then Grandpa spoke again. His voice was stronger now, like something in him had been unlocked. He said he had contacted his attorney before we left. He said he was updating his will. He said he was leaving his house and his remaining savings to me, because I was the only one who had ever treated him like he mattered. My mother started to protest, to cry, to make all the sounds people make when consequences arrive. She said he could not do that. She said the house had been meant to stay in the family. She said she had been planning on that inheritance. The admission hung in the air. She had been planning on it. She had already counted money that was not hers to count. Grandpa's face hardened. He said that was exactly the problem. He said he had spent years watching his own daughter treat him like an obligation rather than a person. He said he was tired of being managed instead of loved. My father tried to intervene. He said this was getting out of hand. He said families did not air their dirty laundry like this. He said we needed to calm down and discuss things privately. I almost laughed at that, privately, as if they had ever extended me the same courtesy, as if my name being crossed off that guest list had been private. As if the years of favoritism and theft had been private. I did not let my mother finish her next protest. I said I hoped someday they understood that this was not revenge. This was simply the truth, finally being spoken out loud. Then I ended the call. The screen went dark. The hotel suite was silent except for the distant sound of the city outside. Grandpa sat very still in his chair. I could see the exhaustion on his face, the emotional toll of finally saying things he had been holding for years. But there was also something else there. Relief. The kind that comes from setting down a weight you forgot you were carrying. I asked him if he was okay. He nodded slowly. He said he should have done that years ago. He said he should have protected me when I was young. He said he was sorry it took this long. I knelt beside his chair and took his hand. I told him none of this was his fault. I told him the people who should have protected us had failed us both. I told him we had each other now, and that was enough. We sat like that for a long time, 2 generations of the same family, finally choosing each other. The days that followed were strange and quiet. My phone continued to buzz with messages I did not read and calls I did not answer. The family group chat had apparently become a war zone, with relatives taking sides, demanding explanations, offering theories about what had really happened. Grandpa and I ignored all of it. We kept exploring Tokyo, kept eating incredible food, kept collecting moments that belonged only to us. We took a day trip to Kamakura to see the giant Buddha statue that Grandpa had seen in photographs decades earlier. He stood in front of it for a long time, his face tilted up toward the serene bronze face, something like awe in his expression. He said the Buddha looked peaceful. He said that was what he wanted now. Not reconciliation necessarily, not revenge, just peace. The kind that came from accepting things as they were instead of wishing they were different. We visited a traditional tea house one afternoon, sitting on tatami mats while a woman in a kimono prepared matcha with movements that looked like slow motion. Grandpa watched every gesture, mesmerized by the precision, the intentionality, the way every action had meaning. Afterward, he told me the tea ceremony reminded him of something his own mother had said once. That the way you did anything was the way you did everything. That paying attention to small things made the big things easier. I thought about that a lot in the days that followed, about how my parents had treated the small things, the everyday kindnesses, the basic acknowledgments of my existence. They had failed at those consistently, which meant the big failures, the money, the exclusion, the lies, were not surprises at all. They were simply the logical extension of thousands of smaller choices. One afternoon, sitting in a peaceful garden in Hamarikyu, surrounded by perfectly manicured trees and the distant hum of the city, Grandpa asked me what I was going to do next. I told him I was not sure. I said I had spent so many years building something, proving something, that I was not certain who I was without the struggle. He nodded slowly, like he understood. Then he said something I have carried with me ever since. He said that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stop running. Not towards something or away from something, but just stopping. Standing still long enough to figure out what you actually wanted, not what other people told you to want. I looked at the water, at the carp swimming in lazy circles, at the sky reflected on the surface. I told him I thought I might want to start something new. Not a company this time, but something smaller. Something that helped people like me. People who came from families that did not support them find their footing. He smiled at that. He said it sounded like exactly the kind of thing I would do. He said Grandma would have loved that idea. She had always believed that the purpose of having more than enough was to help those who did not have enough yet. I felt the truth of that settle into me. Not as a burden, but as a direction. A reason to keep moving forward that was not about proving anything to anyone. We flew home a week later, both of us different than when we had left. At the airport in Seattle, I helped Grandpa into my car and drove him back to his little house in Salem. It looked different now, or maybe I was just seeing it clearly for the first time. Small, yes, but full of him. Full of the life he had built despite everything. Before I left, he made me promise to visit more often. Not just when the family drove me away, but regularly. Like family should. I promised. He also gave me something. The travel guide to Kyoto he had been reading on the plane, with notes in the margins about places he wanted to see someday. He said he was too tired to make another trip like that, but maybe I could go and tell him about it. Maybe I could be his eyes when his own were not strong enough. I took the book and held it like it was precious. Because it was. As I drove back to Seattle, I thought about everything that had happened. The exclusion, the revelation, the trip, the confrontation. None of it had been what I planned when I woke up that Tuesday morning and saw my name crossed off a guest list. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the best moments were the ones you could not plan, the ones that found you when you finally stopped trying to fit into spaces that were never built for you. The road stretched out ahead of me, familiar and different at the same time. The same highways I had driven 100 times. but now I was seeing them through new eyes. Eyes that had seen Tokyo at sunrise. Eyes that had watched my grandfather's face light up when he tasted tonkatsu for the first time. Eyes that had finally stopped looking backward. It has been 18 months since Tokyo. Grandpa is still in his house in Salem, but I visit every few weeks now. We cook together sometimes. I made tonkatsu last month, and it was not as good as the restaurant in Tokyo, but he said it was close enough. He keeps a framed photograph on his mantle, the one of us in front of Sensoji Temple. Next to it is an older photograph, him and Grandma on their wedding day. He says we are both his girls now. My parents have not contacted me directly since the video call. I hear through cousins that they are struggling with the consequences of that public exposure. The extended family knows now. Everyone knows. The story spread faster than any of us expected. Someone on the video call, maybe a cousin who was listening in, had recorded parts of it. Fragments appeared in family group chats, then got shared beyond. Within a week, most of our extended family knew about the stolen money, the lies, the exclusion. Some relatives reached out to me. A few offered apologies for not noticing sooner. Most just wanted details, gossip currency they could trade at the next family gathering. I ignored those messages. Vanessa sent me a long email 6 months ago. She apologized, sort of. She said she had not known where the money came from. She said our parents had told her it was a wedding gift from them. She asked if we could talk. I have not responded yet. Maybe someday I will. Maybe forgiveness is possible when the person who wronged you genuinely understands what they did. But I am not in a hurry. I spent 36 years rushing to make things comfortable for people who never extended me the same courtesy. The baby was born 3 months after we returned from Tokyo. A girl. My parents sent a photograph to the family group chat, announcing her arrival. No one sent me anything directly. I sent a gift card to a college savings fund in the baby's name. Anonymous. I did not want my sister to know it was from me. I did not want the gesture to become a bridge they could use to reach me before I was ready. Maybe my niece will grow up to be the difficult one. Maybe she will ask questions her parents do not want to answer. Maybe she will be too much or not enough, and they will treat her the way they treated me. If that happens, I hope she finds someone like Grandpa. Someone who sees her clearly. Someone who chooses her when everyone else is choosing easier options. I started a foundation 3 months ago. It provides grants to first-generation entrepreneurs from difficult family backgrounds. The kind of people who have to build everything themselves because no one handed them a seed fund or a safety net. We have funded 47 projects so far. Every acceptance letter I sign feels like a small revenge against the universe that tried to keep people like me down. Grandpa turned 82 last month. I threw him a party at his house, just a small gathering of people who actually cared about him. We ate sushi from a restaurant in Portland and looked at photos from Tokyo. He keeps a framed picture of us at Sensoji on his mantle now, right next to the photo of Grandma. Sometimes, when I visit, he asks me to tell him about the foundation, about the people we are helping, about the future I am building. And sometimes, late in the evening when the light is soft and the house is quiet, he tells me he is proud of me. Not for the money, or the success, or any of the things the world uses to measure worth, just for who I am, for who I have always been. That, more than $340 million, more than a company, more than any revenge fantasy, is the thing I carry with me. If you have ever been crossed off a guest list by your own family, if you have ever been told you were too much or not enough, if you have ever discovered that the people who were supposed to love you chose someone else instead, I want you to know something. You are not the problem. The people who cannot see your worth are not the authority on what you are worth. The family that excludes you is not the only family you will ever have. The story they wrote about you is not the only story that exists. You can build your own life. You can find your own people. You can create something beautiful from the ruins of what was supposed to break you. I sat in my corner office that Tuesday morning, looking at my name crossed out on a guest list, and I felt like the world was confirming everything I had always feared about myself. 18 months later, I sit in my grandfather's kitchen, eating sushi and laughing at old stories, and I know the truth. They lost me. not the other way around. Thank you for listening to my story. Tell me in the comments where you are, what you are doing, what this brought up for you. If you have ever been told you were too difficult, too intense, too much for your own family, remember this. The people who cannot handle your fire are not the ones who get to decide whether you shine. Silence can be power. Truth can be the loudest revenge. And sometimes the best thing you can do with a crossed-out name is write yourself an entirely different story. I hope you write yours.